Have you ever experienced that subtle feeling, almost a whisper from the soul, that there's a deeply hidden part of you, desires you don't always dare to name, even in the silence of your thoughts? Think of a secret place within you, where genuine longings reside, often covered by layers of fears. Welcome to Beyond the Unconscious. Today, our journey leads us to an essential question. Why do we so often repress our true desires? If you yearn to understand the internal forces that lead us to this distancing from ourselves, and the impact of this on our lives, this video is an invitation. Prepare for a profound journey of self-discovery. To begin our exploration, it's crucial to touch upon the nature of desire itself. As we've discussed here on Beyond the Unconscious, for psychoanalysis, especially from Freud's perspective, desire is more than a simple want. It's a primal force, a vital energy that constitutes and deeply moves us, like an underground current that shapes the landscape of our soul. It's the purest expression of our being, in search of something, in search of self-realization. But what then would be the true desires in this intimate context? They are those most authentic, most unique longings that spring from our deepest core, as if they were the unique melody of our existence. Often, they are like the original seeds of our soul, representing what is most spontaneous and personal in us. They can be manifestations of experiences from our childhood, expressions of our purest creativity, or deep longings for connection and expression. These desires, at times, don't fit perfectly into social frameworks or the idealized image we try, with so much effort to maintain before the world and ourselves. Because they are so raw, so genuine, and often so distant from what we expect of ourselves or what others expect, they frequently reside in the vast and mysterious territory of our unconscious. To our internal judge, that part of us that has learned to fear judgment, they may seem improper, selfish, or dangerous, and that's why they become candidates to be silenced. If these desires are so genuinely ours, carrying the essence of our being, why do they end up hidden, locked in that inner vault? Why can't we live them to the full? This is where we need to understand a fundamental and ingenious defense mechanism of our mind, described by Freud: repression, or the process of pushing unwanted thoughts into the unconscious. It's not a simple forgetting, like not remembering where we left an object. It's an active, powerful, and crucially, predominantly unconscious psychic process. Its main function is to be a protective barrier, an internal wall, keeping away from consciousness thoughts, memories, feelings, or, especially, desires that our ego, the instance that adapts us to reality, perceives as dangerous, painful, shameful, or unacceptable for our equilibrium. Imagine an efficient and rigorous gatekeeper at the entrance to your conscious mind. This gatekeeper is repression. It has an invisible list of what can or cannot be admitted into the main room of consciousness. If a desire evaluated as, quote, forbidden or threatening tries to cross this border, it's barred and sent to the cellars of the unconscious. The curious and sometimes tragic thing is that we don't even consciously perceive this operation. We only feel the effect. The desire disappears from sight, but not from psychic existence. This mechanism is essential for our psychic survival, especially in childhood, helping to cope with overwhelming impulses and realities for a developing psyche. However, it's important to remember that this, quote, solution of hiding desires from ourselves also has its price. A price we frequently pay with our vitality, spontaneity, joy of living, and our ability to feel whole, authentic, and truly connected to life. But what exactly triggers this powerful mechanism of repression? What are the internal forces and experiences that lead us to lock away our most genuine desires? The first great force we need to investigate is our, quote, internal moral guardian, the instance that Freud called the superego. It is, to a large extent, the main architect and the great instigator of repression in our psychic life. Imagine the superego as a sometimes implacable judge, residing within us, constantly evaluating our thoughts, feelings, and, of course, our most intimate desires. It was formed from the internalization of the voices of our parents, our educators, the norms of society, and the culture in which we grew up. It is the one that holds the internal code of conduct, the invisible manual of what is considered good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable. And when a desire that springs from our ID, our most instinctive and pulsional part, is considered by this superego as dirty, too selfish, dangerous, or shameful, the order to repress is quickly triggered, like an internal alarm. Thus, desires that can be profoundly human, such as aggressive ones in certain situations, sexual impulses that we have learned to see as taboo, longings to break with traditions, or the desire to put our needs first, can be quickly silenced by this vigilant superego. Often, this happens before we even have a chance to understand them. Another powerful root of repression, deeply intertwined with the formation of the superego, lies in fear. And not just any fear, but primordial fears, originating in our earliest experiences. The fear of punishment, and perhaps more fundamentally, the fear of losing the love and protection of those figures who, in childhood, represented our world. Think of a small child. When they express certain desires, curiosity, anger, autonomy, and this expression is met with severe criticism, punishment, or that disappointed look that withdraws affection, the child learns quickly. They learn in their body and soul that certain desires carry the risk of pain, rejection, or loneliness. Freud spoke of the, quote, castration complex not only in the literal sense, but as a broader symbolic fear of a significant loss, of severe retaliation for transgressive desires, especially those linked to the intense drama of the Oedipus complex. To avoid this fantasized catastrophe, the loss of parental love, the child represses these desires, internalizing the prohibition. The desire becomes dangerous because its expression threatens the essential bond of love. Along with the internal judge and the fear of losing love, there is another overwhelming emotion that often commands the act of repression: anguish. Repression often functions as an almost desperate attempt by our ego to protect us from levels of anxiety, guilt, or psychic pain that would, at that moment, be simply unbearable to face consciously. It is, in essence, a maneuver to escape from suffering that is announced as imminent and devastating. Imagine a desire that, if fully recognized by us, would place us before a terrible internal conflict. It could be a desire that contradicts our conscious values, or that would force us into an impossible choice. Or, still, a desire that, if fulfilled, would bring consequences perceived as disastrous in our reality. The mere possibility of facing this desire head-on, with all its implications, can generate an anguish that overwhelms us. In these cases, the ego, seeking to preserve a minimum of equilibrium, may, quote, choose to repress the problematic desire. It's like sweeping the dust under the rug. The problem is not solved at its root, but at least temporarily, it disappears from our conscious field of vision, relieving the tension. Repression here acts as an emergency solution, a way to avoid the overflow of anguish, even though in the long run, this solution may prove quite costly. Finally, when exploring the reasons for repression, we cannot fail to mention the impact of traumatic experiences. Trauma is an event that exceeds the psyche's ability to process and integrate it. Faced with such excruciating psychic pain, repression can act as an extreme but vital defense mechanism. Memories, terrifying feelings, and even desires linked to trauma can be massively repressed. It's an attempt to protect psychic integrity, to allow life to continue, even with a part of oneself anesthetized. Although this repression may be crucial for immediate survival, the repressed traumatic material continues to exert its subterranean influence, often leading to painful repetitions or a feeling of being haunted by something that cannot be named until it can be elaborated. Whether due to a very severe superego, childhood fears that still persist, our attempt to escape anguish, or traumatic experiences that have marked us, repression pushes certain desires away from our consciousness. But, and here lies one of Freud's most fundamental discoveries, what is repressed does not passively fall asleep. The unconscious does not remain silent. What is banished from consciousness continues to be charged with psychic energy, like a blocked spring of water. The water continues to flow and will seek other, perhaps unexpected outlets to manifest itself. Freud called this phenomenon the return of the repressed. It means that unconscious material, especially repressed desires, is always seeking ways to circumvent the barrier of repression and emerge in our lives, even if it does so in disguised, symbolic, or sometimes quite painful ways. But how do these repressed desires manifest themselves concretely? What are the signs, often subtle, that something important within us is trying to be heard? Recognizing these manifestations is the first step to understanding what our unconscious is trying to communicate to us. One of the most classic forms is neurotic symptoms, that persistent anxiety without a clear cause, irrational and paralyzing fears, phobias, obsessive thoughts that don't leave us alone, or compulsive behaviors that we feel forced to repeat. Often, a symptom is a compromise formation, an attempt by the psyche to give vent to the repressed desire, while at the same time keeping it disguised so that it is not recognized by consciousness. Sometimes, the body screams what the mouth keeps silent. Physical symptoms without an apparent organic cause, tension, headaches, chronic digestive problems, skin allergies that appear during moments of stress, inexplicable fatigue, can be the language that the repressed desire finds to express itself when the psychic pathway is too blocked. This is what we call somatization. Who hasn't exchanged a name, forgotten a word, or made a small mistake that seemed to reveal a hidden intention? Freud called these slips of the tongue or parapraxes. They are small cracks in the armor of repression, through which fragments of our unconscious desires or thoughts escape, often surprising us but always being significant. Dreams, for Freud, are the royal road to the unconscious. During sleep, the censorship of repression loosens, and repressed desires find a stage to act themselves out, albeit symbolically, and often seemingly illogically. Learning to look at our dreams with curiosity can give us valuable clues. Another subtle manifestation is that persistent feeling of inner emptiness, chronic boredom, a diffuse dissatisfaction with life. Even when, apparently, everything is fine, it's as if an essential part of us were absent, anesthetized. This emptiness can be the reflection of the absence of our truest desires which, because they are repressed, cannot propel us and give color and meaning to our existence. Have you ever found yourself repeating the same mistakes in relationships or sabotaging your chances of success? These patterns of self-sabotage and repetition of choices that generate suffering can be a complex way in which the repressed manifests itself. It's as if, unconsciously, we were enacting unresolved conflicts or punishing ourselves for desires considered guilty. Finally, the repression of desires, especially those linked to our affective and sexual history, can manifest itself in difficulties of intimacy and in the ability to feel pleasure, anhedonia. Blocks in sexuality, fear of surrendering to a relationship, can be signs that important desires have been frozen. Recognizing all these signs of the repressed in our lives can be disconcerting, even painful. It's like discovering a secret room in our own mental house. But this discovery is also a call to look deeper, beyond what we consciously know about ourselves. If the repressed insists on returning, how can we approach it in a transformative way, and not just a suffering one? This inner journey, however, has its challenges. Accessing what has been repressed is arduous, since repression aims precisely to conceal. It requires courage to face what has been hidden, and compassion for our desires that once needed to be silenced for our protection. It is not an easy path, but it is a possible one. A fundamental first step on this path back to oneself is to cultivate the delicate art of attentive self-observation and truly sensitive listening. This means learning to genuinely pay attention to those signs we mentioned: symptoms, dreams, slips of the tongue, repetitions, not as mere errors or problems to be eliminated, but as valuable messages from our unconscious. It is a matter of gradually developing a posture of genuine curiosity and acceptance in relation to our own emotions, thoughts, and fantasies, even those that seem most strange or quote, unacceptable to us. Instead of judging them immediately, we can ask ourselves, What does this really want to tell me? Where does this feeling come from? What part of me is trying to express itself here? This inner listening, stripped of the haste of judgment, is able to open up previously unimaginable internal spaces. Often, however, this self-observation, however important it may be, encounters its own limits. It is extraordinarily difficult to be our own psychic archaeologists full-time, especially with such ingrained defenses, without the appropriate tools or an experienced guide. This is where psychoanalysis, as a method of investigating the unconscious and as a therapeutic practice, offers a unique, safe, and protected path and space, so that the repressed can gradually emerge, and above all, be spoken, be named. In the analytical setting, through the fundamental technique of free association, where we are invited to speak whatever comes to mind, however illogical or seemingly unimportant it may seem, the careful interpretation of dreams, slips of the tongue, and the analysis of the relationship that is established with the analyst, transference, it is possible, little by little, to reveal the veils that conceal our repressed desires, our archaic fears, and the conflicts that paralyze us. It is a patient, handcrafted work of deciphering. It is crucial to understand that the objective of analysis is not a chaotic release of all desires, but rather elaboration, understanding the origin, meaning, and function of these desires in our history. From there, we can integrate them more consciously into our personality, find healthier ways to deal with them, or even bear the pain of the impossibility of their fulfillment, without this preventing us from living fully. We have traveled a profound journey today, haven't we? Together we explored the labyrinths of our minds to try to understand why, so often, we end up repressing our truest desires, those that carry our essence. We have seen that the fear of punishment or loss of love, the severe voice of our internalized moral conscience, the attempt to escape anguish, and the marks of traumatic experiences can lead us to hide vital parts of ourselves. But we also discovered, with Freud, that these desires do not disappear. They insist on manifesting themselves, in disguised ways, asking to be heard. Recognizing and, above all, welcoming these desires, however challenging this process may seem at times, is an act of profound courage and a luminous path to a life with more meaning, more authenticity, and a greater sense of wholeness. It is not an easy or quick task, but each small step we take towards ourselves, towards listening to our inner world, is a rediscovery of our immense vital power. Sensitive and curious inner listening is, without a doubt, the key to this transformation. And you, throughout this conversation here on Beyond the Unconscious, what feelings or thoughts did this exploration of desire and guilt awaken in your experiences? Were you able to identify reflections of this repression in your own life? Or perhaps recognize desires that, silently, are asking for passage and attention? Share your impressions, your doubts, and your experiences here in the comments. Your sharing is very valuable and immensely enriches our community of search and learning. If this content touched you, like, subscribe, and share with those who need to hear this. Until our next meeting, on another journey beyond the unconscious.